bankruptcy of a billion-dollar company, a foreign war costing us tens of billions of dollars, and the rigging of our House of Representatives and congressional powers. This and much more will be discussed on this episode of Freedom First with Hayden Smith. And we will open up with a little prayer because our desire is to make the Lord Jesus Christ the center and the whole of all of our activities. So, dear Lord, we thank you for this wonderful day that we are able to be here and gather and enjoy each other's company and talk about various problems approaching our society. And I ask that you would give us wisdom and discernment to know what to say and what to believe, and that in any and all things we make this about you and your glory. Amen. And joining us in studio, we have Miss Olivia Notch. And then we also, in the booth, have Mr. Titus Kvien, who we love so dearly. We had some issues with the camera, so it took us like 45 minutes to deal with, but we got it kind of figured out.
We're learning on the fly. It's okay.
So this should be lots of fun. On the first point of the docket, Spirit Airlines, gone. Saturday, May 2nd, they stopped abruptly, ending all of their flights, leaving consumers stranded in various areas, including their employees. 17,000 employees were being laid off because of this closure. People have different people that they blame for this. A lot of people are blaming it on Trump and the rise of oil, causing jet fuel prices to go up, which is obviously a factor, but I would like to make it well known that Spirit has filed for bankruptcy twice since 2020, and this was a long time coming, and this was according to the Transportation Secretary, Sheen Duffy. They have lost $2.5 billion since 2020. And remember, 4 of those years were with Joe Biden. So they asked President Donald Trump for a $500 million bailout, which they did not receive. And another aspect of this was in 2022, the JetBlue just asked and sent an offer to buy Spirit Airlines, I believe for about $4.2 billion, something like that. And Pete Hegseth, I believe Pete Hegseth, as the transportation secretary, along with other Biden officials, said, no, you can't do that for antitrust purposes. So that's what happened. The main sort of commentary on this is whether or not the Trump administration should have provided a bailout for Spirit Airlines. I am of the belief, no, they should not, because I am a bit more of a capitalist purist than some individuals. I think one of the biggest flaws that we have is that certain companies get too big to fail, such as the big banks did in 2008, which doesn't mitigate the loss. It just moves the loss to other people, mainly us, the taxpayers. So we all felt the hurt when the people who should have, the banks, they should have. And in this instance, I don't want taxpayer dollars going to a company that I've never used. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's quite fair.
And a company that, I didn't know a ton about this. I mean, I've heard snippets of it. I'm chronically online, all of that. But everything you have just said has shown that this company is not very responsible in general. You failed for bankruptcy. There's all these failed mergers. A lot of failed mergers could genuinely be because people don't want to tie themselves to basically like a dead weight in the ocean. And so the idea that we're going to give specifically Spirit a bailout after all of these failed attempts at a lot of different things, that's crazy. It wouldn't even really be different. I was about to say it'd be different if it was a mostly successful company, but if it was mostly successful, they probably wouldn't need a bailout.
I'm not a big fan of bailouts. Again, It's anti-capitalistic. It allows companies to make egregious mistakes in their business practices and to continue to exist when they don't deserve to. Not a big fan of that. The mergers,
it's very enabling,
the merger, obviously it failed because Joe Biden, I know a lot of people were arguing from the standpoint of keeping flights cheap, but maybe there isn't a market for cheap flights because the people who pay for these cheap flights aren't exactly the most reliable customers. And this has been a general shift in the general economy as well, as there seems to be a divide of companies not really trying to work for the middle guy anymore, because that's kind of annoying. They're either very budget or trying to go for the higher end customers, because the higher end customers are so much easier to deal with. If we're being completely honest, it's because a lot of consumers, especially in the lower end and middle, are very difficult, whether that just be person-to-person relations, haggling. It can be difficult and annoying. So a lot of companies found it advantageous to just price themselves out of those that class of people, so that they can focus on clients that are far less frugal with their money and far more accepting of different policies. And if I'm being completely honest, for something like airline travel, a bit more cleanly and kind.
Yeah, because I'm always willing to pay a little bit extra to be on the Delta flight. You never catch me on the Spirit flight. And I think that's a lot of people. It is the bottom of the barrel, and it's the thing that I think a lot of what you're saying is absolutely true about it. In that they obviously just haven't provided a service that is, in demand for a lot of people. I don't know. It is a shame though for all of the people who got notifications, like people who were supposed to go to the airport that day, and it was basically they're told, don't come to the airport, don't show up, maybe you'll get a refund.
And people were on vacations, and then they were in the middle of a vacation. It's like, actually, your return flight doesn't exist. Now, other companies have picked up the slack in a lot of those instances, offering
deals and things like that.
Deals and flights back, specifically for the employees that have been kind of semi-stranded. So that's been very nice and kind of those different institutions.
And I guess that's what I don't get, too, is I feel as though there's no world in which Spirit Airlines didn't sort of see this coming. It's not as though you're fine one day and then all of a sudden you need to lay off 17,000 people and cancel all of these flights. That's what's kind of jarring to me, is that, basically left all of these people out to dry. And you think there would be some sort of, I don't know, some sort of phase out of we're going to book less and less flights and we're going to, lay people off. I don't know.
It's actually quite a surprising thing, because you say that and it feels like, there should be. But for a lot of companies, it is
and
just
I know that.
The money switch just turns off, and the business stops, and it's like, do whatever you want now. The business is gone. No one works here anymore. So kind of no one really knows what to do. And when you try to slowly shut down a company, it gets really weird, where you're like, yes, work, but in like 3 weeks, you're not going to be working here anymore. Obviously,
and maybe
that would be preferred.
Maybe the layoffs, I don't know, but it's just obviously preferred. I'm just like, they had to see this coming. They had to have some idea of it. And so how can you be in good conscience booking people's flights back home when you know that there's a chance that they won't be able to get back home?
I wonder who the first person to not show up to the office was. Like, was it the CEO of the company, and he just said, no, I'm not going in today. We're done. It would be interesting to know how much the employees knew about this. So moving on to another topic, we have interesting news on the other side of the planet. Iran, President Trump, I believe on Sunday, announced his plans to Operation, I believe, is it Freedom? Project Freedom, to help commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. There is roughly 2,000 stranded vessels in the Strait of Hormuz trying to get out, and the plan is to help them escape, as it were, helping upwards of 20,000 different seamen escape effectively captive, get them to go back to where they belong, and ideally open up transit for all companies in the region except for Iran. But it's a work in progress. I believe they got a couple ships in through as of today. And then Iran fired some cruise missiles at some commercial vessels. Sorry, I was blanking on the
No,
word.
you're good.
Commercial vessels. And
I'm just hearing all of this for the first time, so I'm on the edge of my seat. What's he going to say?
Well, I'm just rattling off news, I guess. So yeah, they fired some cruise missiles. They're all shot down. The U.S. claims that no ships were hit. Different sources like Al Jazeera claimed that they were, or at least the Iranians said that they did hit some ships. This did not end the ceasefire. However, the U.S. has also shot down numerous small vessels caught harassing commercial vessels. But all of these have not officially ended the ceasefire. Also, the U.S. removes 5,000 troops from Germany, specifically after some comments made by the Germany's Chancellor, Friedrich Merz. He said that Iran had, quote unquote, humiliated the United States, and he questioned how Mr. Trump planned on ending the conflict. The Americans obviously have no strategy, said Mr. Merz. I believe that was a weird last name for me to say. And then Trump pulled 5,000 troops out of Germany, which they were not a fan of. Shortly after,
Germany wasn't a fan of it?
Germany wasn't a fan of it.
Oh,
Shortly after, Germany's chancellor came out in support of America. Now, this removal of the 5,000 troops is not a complete reactionary thing on Trump's part. It was something that's been talked about and planned and potentially done for a couple of years now. It technically returned the levels of troops in Germany to the level it was in 2022. This is according to the New York Times. So it's not like a complete exodus. It's just a lot of extra troops were put there over the last few years, and this is a removal. And you could say, Trump felt egregiously injured, so he said, what, screw it. I'm going to do it now. Whatever. I don't know.
Hold on. So the German chancellor withdrew support from America? Is that what you're saying?
No, I guess he made comments about that he doesn't think that America has performed well in Iran and that they've been humiliated. And then the next day, Trump announced that they're removing 5,000 troops from Germany.
Yeah, I don't know. That one is interesting to me. Not interesting, like it's more of the same, but I do think that's really like something that we see a lot of countries and leaders being hypercritical of the United States and then like finding out just why they need us. I mean, that's it. My criticism forever is that we're everybody's military. Like Germany doesn't have an adequate military. The UK doesn't have an adequate military. They can't actually perform in conflicts the way that we do, and we are their military, and then they have the gall to, I don't know, just chastise the United States. And I do think that there is an argument that Donald Trump could be a little bit more gracious when taking criticism. I think that there are things that people have said about him that are true, and he reacts very poorly. But I do think this is, I don't know, it's kind of like poetic justice.
And then a group of nations are starting to say that they won't let America use their air bases to fight against Iran, specifically Spain. I believe France had for some period of time. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar have also recently came out and said they weren't going to let the U.S. fly out of their air bases, which isn't a big hit to us because we have aircraft carriers in the region, which basically give us massive mobile air bases that we can put anywhere. So it's not a huge hit. It's more of the sentiment, which is not ideal. But the U.S. maintains their blockade over the region, withholding upwards of 70% of the regime's income, which 80 to 90% of the oil that is exported from Iran goes directly to China. So that's obviously been an aspect of this. And then Iran gave the United States a new 14-point proposal for peace. This one, just like the other one that they'd given, I believe was a 10-point plan. Again, it really didn't have anything that America wants. I would say I don't believe Iran understands the position that they're in. So,
well, and some of the advisors to Trump were telling media that as soon as Trump got a hold of those the 10-point plan, he literally reached over and threw it in the garbage and said, we have the upper hand. Don't give us this baloney.
So here I'll give my commentary on some of the different news aspects that just came out, starting with the 14-point proposal plan. It's garbage. It is horrible. It's a laughable joke. The fact that the Iranians would believe that they could get half of what they wanted is absurd. Effectively, it boils down to this. It is Iran saying, America, you will leave the area, lift the sanctions. Previously, I believe it was also reparations, but I think they might have left that out for this one. But so
that's a good idea.
You'll leave the area, stop the war in Lebanon with Israel, relieve all the sanctions. We, Iran, will maintain control of the Strait of Hormuz to do with as they please. And in return, they will open the Strait of Hormuz and then say that in the future, we can have discussions about the nuclear program, which was the express reason of us being there. Now, on the American side, our desires effectively boils down to one big main thing, which is the complete and total concession of Iranian nuclear capabilities for in perpetuity. That is the one big concession that Iran is holding fast on that they won't do, and they keep asking for all this other stuff, which is effectively inconsequential compared to this goal to us.
Yeah.
But
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I believe Iran, like many other people have commentated, has very little grasp of the situation they're in. That, or they're just faking their what they believe is. They have been economically cut off. They have effectively no military. Right now, it is just a sitting match. We are just waiting for them to give up, because this is often, this is very analogous to what you had often in Middle Times, where you are sieging a city with walls, and we have stonewalled off their economy. And that includes all aspects of it. That will include their food and their power and all manner of their ability to run their nation. They were already a nation on the brink of total economic and societal collapse. And now they've had the primary source of their income has been removed from them, being their oil exports. So we can sit here technically, effectively, indefinitely, and just wait for them to die. And it is up to them to decide. They have no power. The only power that they technically have right now is American weakness. And I believe that they're playing off very heavily the idea that America will get bored and the midterms will show up and the leftist news will keep running cover for them and tell everyone how terrible Trump is, and it'll make the Republicans look bad. And eventually the current administration will chicken out and pull back and open up the strait by any means necessary to make the current constituents happy to try to win the midterms. So I believe they don't believe that we have the stomach to hold out. If they did, they would already have conceded, because obviously there's no way they can actually beat us.
Yeah. What I was going to say is it's really funny, the 14-point plan. And there's that old, phrase, which is you don't negotiate with terrorists because they're crazy, right? And you absolutely don't make concessions with terrorists either. I mean, if there's any sort of negotiation happening, you need to make sure that you're the one ending up on top. But I really enjoyed what you had said about how Iran doesn't really understand the position that they're in. And I think that almost every other not every other person, obviously, but a lot of people in the US, a lot of people around the world don't understand that position either. Like this whole idea that you're not going to allow the American military to use your bases. Do they not understand that we have the upper hand? It doesn't matter if you let us use your bases. And when there is trouble in your area of the world, who are you going to call on? You're going to call on the United States, whom you turned your back on during their conflict. And I just think it's so laughable. And every time I hear about international politics, international law, all of the war play and all of this stuff, I either am very amused and I kind of like laugh because it's ridiculous, or I am horribly frustrated, and it tends to, be the latter. But just this whole idea of like Daddy America is going to come save us, but we're going to lock our door so he can't come in our room.
Yeah. And then the other aspect of what's going on with the different countries either not supporting us or outright not allowing our military to be involved in their nation. So a lot of these nations are in NATO. So we have effectively signed treaties of alliance in all wartime activities. And the absurd part of this is that over the past 20, 30 years, while these nations have been demilitarizing, they have been counting on us to fight their battles for them if anything real happens. So the idea of this treaty is that it would go both ways. So yeah, we will come here and protect you, but at the bare minimum, if we want to do what we want to do, you have to help us. Otherwise, why would we support you? Why would we protect you if we don't gain anything out of it? And that's why I personally, big fan of us getting out of NATO and just making select alliances with the nations that actually help us.
Yeah, and I've taken a lot of like international politics, international law courses, and basically it's a common understanding that the United States is the police force of, the global, scheme, the whatever. And that would be great. I honestly think if everyone feared and respected the United States and we kind of got to do what we want to do because we have the big military, I honestly think that'd be a good position. It'd be a good position for us to be in NATO and funding everyone and having the biggest military and having everyone borrow our military if in return that meant that they were all extremely cooperative with us. But that's not the reality of it, is they basically benefit from us and then they spit in our faces. And that's the issue. That's why I am in support of withdrawing from NATO and not helping all of these other countries when it comes to their militaries. But when you do think about it, if we actually are the global hegemon and we have that ability to kind of push and boss everyone around, and they are actually going to be cooperative with us, that's a really good position to be in. But I don't know. I think people have gotten a little bit too comfortable with kind of poking the bear when it comes to the United States. And I don't know. I don't think it ends poorly for everyone except for the United States themselves.
Well, yeah. And just the idea that so NATO exists, that if anyone gets attacked, it is considered an act of war against all other members of NATO. A member like Albania, should America go to war if Albania gets attacked by Russia? And I think that's absurd, because in the reverse, if America gets attacked, what is Albania going to do to help America? Approximately nothing. So we have everything to lose, and they have nothing to lose. They have everything to gain. It's just a bad deal. And that's why Trump has tossed around quite often the idea of getting out of NATO, or at least making it so we're not the only ones paying to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And it also puts all of these countries, like, this is kind of off the topic a little bit, but you know how everybody talks about how great some other countries are, their social welfare, how just amazing it is to live in the UK or Scandinavia or all of these places, and how they have all these social services. And then you have to point out the fact that, like, the tiniest sliver of their funding goes to their military. The tiniest sliver of their tax, like, payer dollars goes to NATO. And it's like, well, you kind of can afford to have some of those things when you're not paying your fair share in other respects. Yeah, and I think it is just time to force people. I mean, what I was saying before, I do think is true of, like, if we are going to pay, there is some benefit of being kind of in charge. But ultimately, it would be just better if everyone paid their fair share. I
believe that America should offer military insurance for these nations. So if Albania wants American protection, they pay us
a premium, yeah,
$50 billion a year, whatever. I don't know what it is. For a certain level of an insurance package. And that way, if they can have this treaty with us, but for the most part, most nations won't mess with them, and we can just use the revenue.
Oh, that's a good idea. I haven't heard of that before, but
yeah. If we are going to play this game, I mean, my idea would that we mostly don't play this game, but if we are, we should be getting paid to do it.
No, we should come out on top for sure.
And then a lot of leftists like to argue, well, we shouldn't pay so much for our military. And the reason why we can't do that is because all of the quote-unquote bad guy nations are the nations that are spending also exorbitant amounts of money on their militaries with the express goal of conquering. And a nation like Russia has express goals of conquering different nations. A nation like China has had express goals of conquering other nations. Mm-hmm. And America has been the barrier of most of those things.
It's the U.S. and everybody in the UN is, the UN is supposed to be like friends helping each other. They have an oath to each other to defend each other, but it's the U.S. is an 18-year-old boy and all the other countries are 3-year-olds. Like, they can't defend us, but our job is to defend them.
I would say it's more accurate to say they're geriatric old men.
Whatever, they're defenseless regardless. I don't think it matters.
95 years old, because these, I mean, in comparison to America, most of these nations are far older, but they're far weaker. And I'm okay with having alliances with nations that are beneficial, like mutual defense alliances. A nation like the UK still is a very positive nation to have a military alliance with, though they're making it less and less every single day. The former largest navy on the planet is getting pretty small these days. But another aspect of this Iran issue that I would like to commentate on the brilliance, I think, whether intentional or not, of Trump's Project Freedom to help commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. The reason why I think it is brilliant is because we've had this this ceasefire since April 8th, so almost a month. And negotiations have really not gotten anywhere. And Iran hasn't completely stopped all of their attacks. They've been shooting off some drones, some missiles, but they basically all get shot down. It hasn't really been a problem. But none of these things have been, quote unquote, big enough to end the ceasefire. And we're kind of in this weird spot where we're in a ceasefire. We're trying to make a deal with them. They aren't accepting any reasonable deal. What do? And I think one of the geniuses of this is that, okay, we're going to help commercial vessels through. Iran says, no, you're not. We will stop you from getting any vessels through. We will attack them. We will shoot them down, whatever. If they legitimately send any real attempts to stop a vessel, then that will give the U.S. a pretense to end the ceasefire, and it's not our fault. We tried to do the ceasefire. It's not our fault. So Iran is basically, they're holding everyone hostage. They're saying no one gets through the strait. We still have control over it. They believe they have themselves a position of power. And if we just said no and started attacking them, I think that'd play very poorly in American press of America ended the ceasefire. And whether intentionally or not, I don't know what goes on the inner machinations, I said that word wrong, of Trump's mind. I think
Trump understands that he has to move very carefully and he has to protect himself, not necessarily when it comes to like actually doing something wrong, but doing something that could be perceived as wrong by kind of the crazies on both sides at this point, right? Like, it's not just the leftists who are hyper criticizing him throughout this war. It's also people on the right as well. And so I think he understands that all the eyes are on him. And so he knows that he has to play his cards very carefully. And I think he's been doing a pretty good job, actually.
Yeah. And it is just a well-known fact that the Iran war is not very popular in America. Wars have not been popular in America since World War II. That's just how it is. So I think one of the geniuses of this is we want to get ships through the Strait of Hormuz because we need to open this stuff up to help get oil prices down, get global trade going again. We don't want to just make all of these concessions to Iran. So Iran has been saying no one gets through the strait, and we're going to say yes, they are. And we're going to try to assert some military dominance. If, however, we're kind of calling their threat. They have made a claim that they will stop us, and we're saying, do it. I dare you. And if they do actually try, then we can attack them again and make them hurt worse than they are already without us being the villains, because we tried for peace. We did. And this isn't a pretense for war. This is us just saying, we are going to do how we're going to do. You get to decide if you want to start fighting again. So I think it's actually a very brilliant move on the current administration's part of trying to put ships through. And I hope the war does not start back up again. I hope the ceasefire remains and we start getting ships through the strait, and it'll just show Iran how little power they have over the region. So that'll be beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just quick going through, I believe that is all that I know of right now going on through Iran. We will keep more update as things continue. Everything's been really stalled up. So we'll probably see something big and not too terribly long I would say reasonably within the next month. Something big will probably happen. Another topic of conversation that's been sort of big news lately is the gerrymandering going on across various states in the Union, whether that be Texas or Louisiana, Florida, California. The big one everyone has been talking about is Virginia. And the reason why it has been of such controversy is because the way they desire to gerrymander. So just for a slight understanding of what gerrymandering is, for anyone who isn't completely familiar, every single state has a certain amount of House of Representatives allotted to it. A state like North Dakota only has 1, so this isn't a problem. But other states like Virginia, they have 11. So what they need to do is they need to divide their state up into 11 roughly even populous districts. So each district can elect a representative to go represent them at the national level. Ideally, these districts are supposed to represent different classes or social groups of people who share the different beliefs. So, 40% of Virginia is redneck, then 40% of your electorates should be representing rednecks effectively. That's the idea. Now, the implementation of this, the problem is someone has to draw the line. Someone gets to decide what to do, where these lines get divided. And currently, most states have it where the state legislatures get to pick. And it is okay. The Supreme Court has ruled it okay for partisan district drawing because the understanding is that it will never be completely
Oh, my mic is off. Did you just say that they ruled that it's okay?
It's okay to be partisan.
Because that isn't a ruling that's been made. That is just as the Constitution is right now. Like the Constitution stands of like, this is okay. It's been decided. Like there is nothing in the Constitution currently that would ever indicate that you couldn't part it. I think
I believe there was a court case on this.
There was a court case.
The Supreme Court ruled that it is okay to draw your districts in partisan manners.
But what I'm saying was that that's not like a new decision necessarily.
No,
it's just reaffirming what the Constitution says. I wasn't saying you were wrong or trying to fact check you. I was just making it known that this wasn't like a new, like the Supreme Court looked at the map and was like, yeah, you guys can do party, like you can divide it up by party. Mm-hmm. They didn't decide that. That's just something that like it kind of just is what it is.
This has been for the long time precedent.
But yeah, you continue.
The district lines are supposed to be drawn during the census year. So this would be every 10 years. This happened in 2020 and it's supposed to, 2021. And it's not supposed to happen again until 2031 when the new census is taken and the new representatives are moved around based on the varying populations of each state. So what happened is certain Republican states, I believe they kind of started it, decided that they would redistrict and they through acts of their legislature, constitutional amendments, decided to redraw their district lines because they felt that the way they had been done was very unfair. So they decided to redo it, and in response, a bunch of Democrat states decided to do it as well. And in which case, the big one that everyone's been referencing is Virginia. And the reason why everyone's been referencing Virginia is because of the, dare I say, the magnitude of the trashness of the redistrict drawing. So I think this will be added in post-production, but this is what the current districts look like. They're roughly pretty even. They have about 3 red, 2 in the middle, and the rest Democrat. And then we have what the proposed plan is, which is this. And what you can see is these weird spaghetti lines pulling up from the northeast. And what that is an extension of the DC metro area, which is obviously very, very left-leaning. So the desire is to use the population from the DC area to drown out the votes of the more rural areas. And for reference, Virginia is a state that goes roughly 60-40 Democrat. So about 60% Democrat, 40% Republican in national elections. But they would go from 6 to 5, I believe, in the current districts to 10 to 1 Democrats to Republicans. In comparison, you have the states like Texas and Florida. I don't know which one will be pulled up, but they go from what they have now, let's just say Florida, and then they redistrict to this, which is very chunky, blocky, normal way for them to look. It obviously doesn't look as bad. Now, I know a lot of people, they just hate the district redrawing. The sad reality of it is someone has to do it. Because of the way our House of Representatives works, the fact that it's based on population, and then you have a representative, it has to be moved around. Someone has to draw the line. States like California have a impartial, quote unquote, committee to draw the lines, but obviously it's not impartial. No institution or committee is impartial. But California is another state that's looking to redraw its lines, again, using all of their cities to flood the more rural red areas and make them overcounted. And I know everyone's very upset because they're like, why would the Republicans start this? Why would they do this? This isn't necessarily the Republicans starting it. This is the Republicans correcting it, because the Democrats have in large part controlled these redistrict drawings and made them egregious for a long time. There are actually numerous states amongst the northern east coast of America, these rich, affluent, mostly white areas that have, split Republican, Democrat, mostly Democrat, but have no Republican districts at all.
Well, we had talked about on the last episode that it's essentially the Democrats trying to favor themselves, and they put the Republicans in a trap to where it seems like we're trying to help ourselves, but we're just correcting it. We're working as the checks and balances, essentially.
We're effectively moving it back. I mean, obviously, there's some partisanness of it.
Okay, so imagine that those maps we had just had up, the new one, right? The new districts, their proposed one. Imagine that's how it started. Imagine that's what it looked like.
And in a lot of states, it's somewhat
right. It looks like that, and then the Republicans go, we should maybe redistrict, and they redistrict it to what it's at currently, right? And then all of a sudden the Democrats are screaming, oh my goodness, you're trying to favor yourself. You're trying to win elections because of the way you're districting things, all of that good goofiness. And you look at those two maps and you think, well, obviously this is just the common sense to like redistrict it would be this one where I think it still favors the Democrats marginally.
It does.
An extra district, which is a big deal, but they're still ahead, and they probably could have put themselves ahead even a little bit more. Honestly, they could have, but they had to go and do it so egregiously that it's impossible to ignore. But yeah, if you had looked at that first, I don't know. I think the first one you had shown was the really bad one.
The first one is the normal one.
Okay. Well, the really bad one, the one that looks like
the new one,
the super weirdly shaped red district one. If that's how we started and then we moved it to the one that is somewhat normal and got accused of gerrymandering, like that's what's happening with the Republicans right now, which is absurd.
So the news with the Virginia one is that it was passed as a constitutional amendment, which it got ratified in their state legislature, and then it went to a ballot measure in which it passed at 51% yes. So about, a 1.5% above 50%. And the state Supreme Court ruled that they couldn't do it. And a lot of people are like, yay, a lot of Republicans, and they should be like, yay, because it is egregious. But the reasoning why is not what you think. It isn't because of the partisan nature of the drawing that is acceptable. It is because the nature in which they tried to pass this redistricting. So they had a special session going on for budget-related issues, and then this was crammed in at the end. And then it's supposed to pass through their legislature twice, but it only went through once. And then it's supposed to go have 90 days open to the public to look at before it's on a ballot. It didn't. It only had, I believe it passed in March, and then was it voted on in April?
I do not know.
Oh boy. Because there was one of the votings was in October.
It's not necessarily relevant. All we need to know is it did not have that.
I'm trying to remember the exact dates.
It wasn't long enough. They completely violated procedure. in order to get this passed.
Well, we'll have Titus look it up.
I got it.
So it didn't have long enough to be out in the public, and the reason why is they want to give the constituents enough amount of time to think about, look at, consider the ramifications, because they don't want something to pass and then immediately the next day it's on a ballot measure and the whims of the masses will be like, oh, we really want this, and pass it without any thought or consideration. But another aspect of it was the partisan nature of the measure's wording. So I'm going to read to you how the measure was constructed and put on the ballot. So this was the ballot question. Should the Constitution of Virginia be amended to allow the General Assembly to temporarily adopt new congressional districts to restore fairness in the upcoming elections while ensuring Virginia's standard redistricting process resumes for all future redistricting after 2030 census? So very obviously, referring to your measure as a restoration to fairness gives it its own advertising, in which the proper way to say it is, should you allow the legislatures to redistrict this year? Mm-hmm. And you just leave it at that because you don't want to influence the voters while they're voting.
And what did this, this proposal in circulation, did it include a picture of the map?
I do not believe it did.
Right. Like, I think that's also, obviously it might not be required of them, but I think it should be. I think if you're going to try and pass something like this, you're going to say, we want to redistrict, and we want to redistrict to this. It should be for everybody to see, because then it's very obvious that it's not a measure to restore fairness. It's politically targeted. And yeah, I think that's so funny, because that was what I was going to ask when you were like, it needs to be like circulating out for 90 days. I'm like, what? Just the map, basically? Mm-hmm. Because I think that's all, that's all a normal person would need to look at to vote no.
Mm-hmm. So the official steps to amend the Virginia Constitution is the initial proposal. A proposed amendment is introduced as a resolution in the General Assembly. The first passage, the amendment must be approved by the majority of members elected to each house. Intervening election and election of the Virginia House of Delegates must occur before the second vote. Second passage, the newly elected General Assembly must approve the exact same amendment. Voter ratification, the approved amendment is placed on the general election ballot. A majority of voters must approve it for it to become part of the Constitution. And timeline, the General Assembly cannot submit an amendment to the voters sooner than 90 days after its final passage. In the official litigation of this, the Republicans suing is whether or not the General Assembly was able to pass a constitutional amendment during a special session not called to consider it. So during special sessions, you're only supposed to consider the reasons, you're only supposed to pass laws based off of the topic of the special session. Whether or not the General Assembly had violated a statutory mandate which requires to post any proposed constitutional amendment at circuit clerk offices for public inspection at least 90 days before the election on which it could be voted on. And then third, whether or not the General Assembly first passage had actually met the requirement to pass the amendment both before and after the general election, as early voting had started over a month prior to the first passage. So those are the three main points of litigation in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court there in the state of Virginia ruled that it was not constitutional, or that it will be tabled until a final decision can be made. As far as the states that are continuing to redistrict, the ones all up for grabs are California, Missouri, North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, Utah, and Virginia. So those are the ones that are going on. Also Florida. Florida, I believe theirs has already passed. With Texas and Florida, something like, I think Texas gained an extra 5 Republican districts, and Florida is set to gain another 3 or 4. I'll need Titus to check me on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put it in post-production again.
Yeah, put it in post-production. And then the other huge news for the gerrymandering or redistricting is the Supreme Court struck down in Louisiana, had a proposed districting that was shot down based off of the Voting Rights Act, in which they were required by a federal judge to add another minority majority district. So what the common interpretation of the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was that there needed to be a arbitrary amount of minority districts in a given state to not dilute minority vote, assuming that they
Racial minorities.
Racial minorities. And Louisiana had drawn lines, and then they were sued, and a lower circuit federal court judge ruled that they needed to add another minority majority district, in which, if you look at the pictures, we'll pull up both of them. What they had proposed, it's in this hand, versus what they had to do after. You can see the long, weird sliver through the middle of Louisiana. That was so that they could get another black majority, minority majority district. But it was shot down 6-3 in the Supreme Court because the general consensus was that the government does not permit racial disparagement, as that is a crime. So the forced requirement of racial districts is no longer in existence, which is huge news because this has been around for decades, and many mostly Republican areas have had to make effectively Democrat concessions to make black majority districts.
Yeah, because I mean, you look at it, and the majority of African Americans do vote for Democrats, but I've seen a lot of discussion about this online on like TikTok, that sort of thing, and of specifically people of color, black people, talking about how they just can't believe that this is horrible. And it really just shows, this is more of like a social commentary, but when it comes to race, people really don't mind the idea of segregation if it is beneficial to them, which is something that this is showing. People don't really mind being singled out for their race or being treated differently because of their race, unless it benefits them. And it just kind of shoots up like everything when it comes to equality and what people actually desire. You have to make up for past
injustices.
Right. And that's definitely what it is people do feel as though they're not being treated differently because of their race. They're just, receiving some sort of quasi reparation thing or whatever. But I really, this one does get me fired up because it's like, you actually don't care about equality. You don't care about being treated the same.
It's equity.
Yeah, it's equity at this point. And it's crazy. And then obviously people were talking about it and whatever, but this ruling doesn't mean that there can't be majority black districts. It means that can't be the sole purpose of how we're going to redistrict it. We can't solely redistrict in order to have entire districts. I've said district like 10 times in the last 30 seconds, but we can have districts that are majority minorities, but that can't be the sole purpose of what we're doing. And so this decision didn't mean that you can't obviously redistrict for political party reasons or anything like that. But I think some of the social commentary around it has been kind of interesting, and it's more interesting than the actual nitty gritty of it to me. And maybe that's just because I'm not smart enough to get into that. I don't know. But in the justifications
on SCOTUS blog, in the 36-page opinion, Justice Alito explained that, quote, the Constitution almost never permits the federal government or state to discriminate on the basis of race, end quote. The question before the court, he said, is, quote, whether compliance with the Voter Rights Act should be added to our very short list of compelling interests that can justify racial discriminations, end quote. As a general rule, Alito wrote, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act guarantees voters, including minority voters, an opportunity to cast the vote for their preferred candidate, but the candidate's chances of success may be affected by their choices that the state is allowed to make when drawing a redistricting map, such as the desire to protect incumbents or increase the number of seats held in a particular political party. Under the Constitution, Alito continued, a violation of Section 2 only occurs when, quote, the circumstances give rise to a strong inference that the intentional discrimination occurred, end quote. For example, when there are several possible maps containing majority minority districts, but a state cannot provide a legitimate reason for rejecting all those maps. So the idea being that discriminating against minorities in redistricting is against the law, but you have to prove that that was the attempt and that it can't be reasonably inferred that it was for political reasons, such as, say, a majority of certain demographics will vote for one political party. So those will give you legitimate contexts to vote. I'm not to vote, but to redistrict in a disparaging manner. Because again, the Supreme Court has affirmed that partisan redistricting is legal. That is what it always has been.
And I think people reasonably have a problem with that as well. I mean, there really is no good way to fix that, right? Because like you said, someone has to do it. I don't trust the federal government to do it, right? Like I don't want them to come in and make a law that someone at the federal level is going to go and do the redistricting.
Reasonably, the only way you could quote unquote prevent this is to draw all the districts permanently, which would not account for population variations. Mm-hmm. So, it wouldn't be completely fair. So you'd want to make, I guess the next best fair quote unquote thing would be to make them even off of land mass, which, hey, I'm all for. North Dakota would get way more.
We talked about this last time for sure. And
Rhode Island would get like not even one. They get like half a representative. North Dakota would get like 6. I'm okay with that.
But this kind of defeats the whole point of the way that we do the House of Representatives, which the entire idea of it is that,
the House of Representatives would be representative of the general whims of the masses. That's also why their terms are 2 years. Mm-hmm. So they are more influenced by their constituents and a desire to please them, to truly infer what the populace wants. Where in contrast, the Senate, which is based off of 2 per every state, they also have longer terms, is supposed to be effectively the elder council of America, in which they are less affected by the whims of the masses and more able to think long term because they're not up for another election cycle. They're also required to be older, and they have a more even representation of each of the different regions of the country, not necessarily the populations of the country. So there are different purposes for each house to exist to represent different aspects of the thought process of a political society. So, but
this is the only way to represent ours. If people start fleeing like California per se, right, and they go down in population, I do not under like any circumstances want them to have the same amount of seats that they had before. I think,
and that's what the recensus would be, and it's already been proven that most it was like all but one of the states that got too many representatives in the last census were Democrat, and then vice versa for losing them.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact numbers, but there was obvious, like this happens every year. There's some slop in the census.
And it would be so great. And obviously this is quite a lofty expectation. If we just stopped yelling at each other for it and admitted that each party does it. I obviously am a little biased. I think that the Democrats do it a lot more egregiously than the Republicans do. And I think statistically that would bear out too, if there was some way to actually like realistically analyze it. But I just wish that as soon as someone else was redistricting, everyone would stop freaking out, because as you've shown, it's been happening.
So logically,
forever.
The partisan nature of redistricting exists, but the partisan nature of Republican redistricting is going to lend itself more to a more accurate representation of the actual intent of redistricting, because basically broken down, you're going to have cities vote Democrat and more rural areas vote Republican. Mm-hmm. So the partisan districting of a Republican will be, we want to get all of the members of the city in the same district. They still have to be a part of the district, and they have to be roughly even population. It's not based off land mass. So if a third of your population is in cities, they're still going to be a part of those districts. So what your goal is you're like, okay, we're going to, if we have 10 districts, we are going to have 3 of them 100% Democrat, and then the other 7 100% Republican.
Mm-hmm. Which is a better way to do it too, specifically when you're talking about cities, right? Like, what does the city person really have in common with the person who lives, 30 miles out of town, who lives a totally different lifestyle, has totally different needs, has totally different interests when it comes to politics. It's better to do it that way. It's better to keep all the city folk with the city folk because they're going to be more properly represented if they do that.
And then in vice versa, Democrats, because their population, their voter base is in the cities, their goal is to take the cities and cut them into pieces and sprawl it out into the countryside as far as they can to eliminate the vote of Republicans. So that is why, generally speaking, when you look at Republican-drawn districts, they're very blocky. They look very normal because they are trying to just separate the different classes, not classes, but the different ideological beliefs of people, where Democrats tend to try to strongly push their high population influence as far into the countryside as possible.
And let's be honest, if Republicans put forth a map like that one we saw in Virginia, like would we legitimately ever hear the end of it?
Yeah, not to mention, this is going to be added in post-production, but you have a video of President Obama saying how bad gerrymandering is and that we shouldn't do it and that it's bad for democracy and it is something that the Republicans should not do. And then on the Virginia topic, just happening this year, he's telling all of the voters to vote yes, because that will allow them to save democracy.
Gerrymandering is only bad when the Republicans do it, Hayden.
But this is, again, it's a very common thing for Democrats to do, in which everything they do is good, everything we do is bad. It doesn't have actually any logical consistency to quote unquote end of democracy.
They're determined to see the worst in everything that Republicans do. And I mean, this is a common, like it's actually like considered a psychological phenomenon almost. There's a name for it. I can't remember. It was a long time ago whenever I took the class on it. But like just the tendency of humans to absolutely assume the best in themselves and assume the worst in others when it comes to people's intentions. And I think you could see that a lot. I mean, the other side of it is Democrats want to win. Winning is really important to them. And they are a lot willing to kind of get, down and dirty in order to do it, I think, in a way that Republicans aren't.
And actually, that's pretty good sort of lead into the cliffhanger, because on the next episode, we are going to, or at least I'm going to talk heavily about that Democrats don't like you. They don't like America. They hate what we stand for, and they will do anything to win. So join us later and we will discuss how one of the political parties is in complete antithesis to America in its existence. So thank you for joining us today. This was Freedom First with Hayden Smith. Have a lovely evening. Thank you.